I guess we could go ahead and talk a bit more about the players that we are going to be featuring themselves. So, Oliver, we have actually been able to feature quite a few times throughout our official broadcasts. Most recent accomplishment has been that Gdansk Regional Championship that he was able to get within the same season, but last year before New Year's. But we do know, of course, he has been able to get that second place at EUIC 2022 versus none other than Eric Rios, who ended up winning it all.
Yeah, very experienced, especially at this stage, at this setting. So going to take that experience into this tournament and obviously having a great start coming into day 2, having a flying start again. Hopefully it propels him into the rest of the day in good stead, but has got Nils up in front of him to get through before progressing any further. And Nils has an array of accolades to his name, obviously back in 2009, hitting off his career with a Richmond Regional Championship win, and top 4 at Worlds in 2018, top 8 in 16 and 17, incredible. And then the Malmo Regional Championships back in 2017 as well.
So as you can see, a lot of achievements under the belt of both of these trainers. But we do have the teams available, and we have Oliver rocking the Amungus, Golden Go, Tornadus, Incarnate, Urshifu Rapid Strike. I have to note Life Orb, by the way, Chien Pao, and Landorus Therian, which is Choice Banded.
Yeah, a lot of Pokemon here familiar with Oliver has been using in previous teams where he's had a lot of success. So the comfortability factor is definitely here. Some odd item picks, though, that you're not generally seeing too often, namely that Choice Band on the Landorus. You've got to be very careful around that, because when it starts launching off those Earthquakes, say you've got the synergy there with the Tornadus, it's going to be able to get that Prankster Tailwind up, and you're just going to be able to launch those Earthquakes off. You're not going to take any damage because of the flying type on the Tornadus, and everything on the field that is going to be hit by that Earthquake is going to take a lot of damage. Obviously, the Steel Terra typing there. Then you've got that Urshifu. You rightly pointed out the Life Orb item there. That Surging Strikes damage, especially if we see it in the rain, is going to be hitting extremely hard. Yeah,
real, and I think it's a bit of a compensation for it actually opting to go for the Poison Terror, which is more of a defensive terror rather than that offensive. So being able to capitalize off of that additional damage output is really pivotal, and being able to also have that priority just goes to show that you've got the Aqua Jet available for certain matchups that you need to be able to deal a bit more damage to.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's something that players maybe don't factor in their damage calculations when they're training their own Pokemon. But taking a brief overlook of Nils' team here, we've got the Urshifu Rapid Strike, another one, this time going for that Choice Scarf item here. Favorite of mine, Porygon 2 there, but the Flying Terra type on there, which is really interesting. Eviolite as the item there, giving that defensive boost to the mid-evolution of the Porygon line. Ursaluna, Amoonguss, Incineroar, and then that Fluttermane.
I do like the Chaos energy with that Porygon 2.
Yeah.
Having the Terra flying is something we don't notably see, but it sort of syncs up quite nicely with that Ursaluna having the Earthquake available to itself. So it may be, once you do set up a Trick Room, in the same turn, let's say in a turn 1 scenario, you bring in that Ursaluna, you get the Flame Orb proc, and then all of a sudden you just go and deal a ridiculous amount of damage whilst being able to be completely immune to that side Earthquake.
Yeah, completely, and I think that is good advantage to have there, especially with the Ice Beam there, where you can utilize that quite effectively. If the Terastallization is being used elsewhere, that Lander is really going to be susceptible to that one. And in particular, you don't really want to allow the Porygon to get the Trick Room up, because I think if Nils is able to capitalize in particular with that Ursaluna in a Trick Room environment, it is going to be very difficult for Oliver to deal with. You look at the options on his team, I think you would say, well, you've got immunities to the normal type attacks with your Goldingo, but I mean, at the same time, you don't really want to be taking those ground type attacks, especially, you know, it feels like a battle of the Earthquakes here, doesn't it? A little bit.
A tiny bit. We know there's going to be a lot of tremors along the way, most likely, but we're going to have to see how both of these trainers do really try to prioritize their team strategies in order to go ahead and sort of face up against the flowcharts that they need to. Like we mentioned, there are a couple of things that can counter or at least be a bit of a thorn in Nils' Trick Room mode, being that Amoonguss over on Oliver's side. You know, we did see yesterday that even though, for example, it is there for the redirection, it is there for the pressure, it is also there for the Trick Room, and I think Wolf versus Sebastian in that last final round 9 really showed why it's such a great virtue to be able to have that Pokemon along your side.
Yeah, and the one thing that you would say Nils has an advantage here is the Ursaluna has the Flame Orb item, so it's not really going to be as threatened under a Trick Room environment as, say, we saw some situations play out yesterday where the Among Us was really pivotal in being able to disrupt that Trick Room environment. This time around, the Ursaluna is going to be on the field in that Trick Room environment and say, well, yeah, bring your Among Us because I'm burnt, you can't put me to sleep, and I'm just going to throw out those big spread attacks if I can.
But the real question is, will you be able to position yourself before you can get affected by a spore? And I think that may be the real sort of contention point that Nils has to take into consideration.
Yeah, it's a really good point you make there, but one of the things I think you need to consider is the massive burst damage that Oliver has at the start of the game to maybe even prevent the Trick Room from being set up. And
talk about burst damage, that is exactly what we see available for Oliver, bringing the Landorus Therian choice banded with the Golden Go versus Fluttermane and Incineroar on Nils' side. So even though there has been Intimidate impacting this damage output of the Landorus, it is choice banded, so it's essentially at neutral right now.
Yeah, neutral now, but still going to offer some good damage on the field. Obviously not got the speed advantage that you'd normally see through Choskov, so it's going to be taking damage first before it can get anything off. Has to be wary about that fake out from the Incineroar as well that can come in and disrupt it. Obviously the Goldingo in a great position now. Does have to be wary about a potential attack from the Incineroar if, you know, Nils suspects that the Landorus in a position where it doesn't want to take a fake out and some damage, potentially Moonblast, Shadow Ball from that Fluttermane where it maybe wants to switch out, and that leaves the Goldingo open to maybe getting a Flare Blitz this turn as well.
Indeed, as we do have the Terrestrialization already being equipped right now and utilized over on Oliver's side. It is going to be the Dragon Terror, so wanting to essentially go ahead and remove its weakness to those Ghost-type moves.
But it does create another weakness to Fairy types in Essential. The Shadow Ball coming out here from the Fluttermane, doubling into that Landorus here and getting some good damage onto the field. But this leaves the Goldingo open to do whatever it wants, and it's dropping a Make It Rain.
Whoa!
Not quite enough to get the Fluttermane.
Not quite enough indeed. We've seen these sort of Fluttermanes that do have that third move that's actually a bit more niche of a pick, maybe the Substitute or a Calm Mind, have a bit more bulk available to themselves in order to be able to survive those sort of scenarios, whilst on the other hand, Golden Go, it doesn't have a damage boosting item on its side. It is leftovers, so if there was, for example, like a Metal Coat, it would have likely been enough to be able to dispatch of it.
Yeah, definitely, and I think the Fluttermane in an awkward position here where it can go for another Shadow Ball, can pick up the knockout onto the Landorus, but it's so easy for Oliver just to switch it out here, and you can opt to go for maybe even a Moonblast into that Goldingo here, but if you miss the knockout onto it, that's where you fall a little bit array, because the Make It Rain can come out again and can do huge damage, pick up the knockout onto that Fluttermane. You lose a really key part of your puzzle, and the Incineroar not really as effective anymore because of that Dragon Terror typing.
Hence why we do actually see the switch up here from Oliver's side. He wants to be able to at least capitalize and reduce any Moonblast focuses into that slot and threaten with a Spore going over into the next turn. But we do actually have that Urshifu now also being switched in from Nils' side, and will be able to better position itself into a good spot as Moonblast. Yeah, that's a terrific switch there. You see Mushroom being able to completely sponge that up.
Yeah, really smart switch there from Oliver. Getting the Landorus out of contention, not wanting to lose it too early on so freely. Getting the Among Us onto the field now, perfect, because you look at the Fluttermane, it's only got single target attack, so it can go for the Moonblast, it can go for a Shadow Ball, which potentially threaten that Goldingo, but being able to pull those in alongside pulling in the moves from that Urshifu that's now hit the field, frees up the Goldingo in a position where it is going to be able to throw out maybe a Make It Rain again, remove that Fluttermane, take that big threat from the field, and do some nice chip damage to the Urshifu along the way.
As we do have a redirection effort here with the Among Us, it will be able to pivot away that U-turn, even though it was a critical hit there, so it may or may not put it within Shadow Ball range there, but the most important thing here is to also factor the fact that this Fluttermane does not have access to spread type moves, so it's only going to be single target, hence why Among Us's value and stocks are really heightened in this matchup.
Here we are seeing the Incineroar hit the field and the Urshifu go out. The Shadow Ball coming into the Among Us, not able to take it, but the sacrifice worthy here if the Goldingo is able to remove that Fluttermane from the field. One of their most awkward Pokemon at the minute, but not opting for the attack, going for a nasty plot, boosting that special attack by 2 stages, taking it to +1 in that special attack now, becoming a lot more threatening coming into this next turn.
It is indeed, and well timed with Chien-Pao being able to be brought now without the Intimidate, directly threaten itself enough to lower that attack output, but the question here is, we do have the fake out over on the Incineroar available. Which Pokemon do you want to try to target down and utilize in this scenario? Because the Golden Go is now susceptible to any sort of Moonblast focuses, but you don't want the Chien-Pao's Focus Sash to be broken.
Yeah, and it's an easy option here for Oliver just to double protect, but if you do that, could Nils maybe suspect that and reposition with something else? Maybe get the Incineroar off the field, get that Urshifu back onto the field. With the Scarf, it will then be able to outspeed the Chien-Pao. So you got to be careful if you are Oliver here, not to be super careless in this situation. But like you say, the fake out pressure is a real problem right now, and if you get it wrong, it can put you behind in the match.
Ooh, as we actually have a switch out here, so Nils wanting to go for that level 2 play, thinking it's a bit too obvious for the fake out. I want to try to get some more board state advantage in my favor. Going for the protect as well. Full defensive scenario from Nils, as it may have been suspecting that Sucker Punch, which did try to catch it off guard. And we've got the nasty plot now bringing this Golden Go up to +3 special attack. And Oliver just saying, right, I'm going to read your obvious defensive play, and I'm going to take it a notch higher.
Yeah, and it's exactly what Oliver's done and probably got him to this point in the tournament, really making it difficult for Nils now. You can see the logic in repositioning the Incineroar, keeping it for later, bringing the Amoonguss in for a bit of a sponge up. This next turn got that Rage Powder, going to be able to pull away those Sucker Punch. It's great, but now giving the opportunity to the Goldengo to get another nasty plot off, really going to be in a dominant position, but going for that protect here, not wanting to take any risks.
Yeah, and at this point, we've got redirection available on Nils' side, so you want to try to at least go ahead and dispatch of it with the Chien-Pao. Sure, you're going to break your Focus Sash, but the most important thing is trying to get the redirection off the field, which it has done and did critical hit. I'm not sure if Ice Spinner naturally would have been enough. However, the Rocky Helmet actually coming into play here will remove this Chien-Pao if there is a Moonblast focus on it, but there isn't. The Golden Go was the slot there, so this does mean Chien-Pao will be able to get a Sucker Punch off and pick up the KO if it can avoid fake outs.
This is a huge turn here for Oliver. Really fortunate critical hit. Not so great for Nils here, but is losing that Amoonguss. Not likely going down to the Ice Spinner like you quite rightly mentioned here, but the Goldengo protect, huge. It allows the Chien-Pao to go for that Sucker Punch this next turn, but Nils still has the fake out available now. Going to be able to utilize that against either the Goldengo or this Chien-Pao. Particularly, you probably want to go for the Chien-Pao here. Go for that fake out there, because then you allows your Fluttermane to go for that Moonblast into the Goldengo and potentially pick up the knockout.
Oh, Oliver has to concede and doesn't want to play with the dice here of chances for going for that double protect and risk the Golden Go actually being taken down by a Moonblast. Hence why the Landorus is now on the field. Chien-Pao goes for that safe protect. Oliver doesn't want to try to let up his advantage when it comes to the board state.
Yeah, and it's a really smart decision here, because I think otherwise you're going to have to let that Goldengo take the Moonblast, potentially get knocked out. Then you lose all of that work that you've done before. You've lost all of those nasty plots up to this point, but it's worth it because now you can bring it back in. Now you don't have the fake out active for Nils on the field, and you're in a position with the Goldengo where it can start doing some work again.
It will indeed, as it does come back onto the field, but this Incineroar is starting to be a bit of a threat as well, knowing that Nils does have that Urshifu available in the back, Choice Scarfed as well, and there's a certain scenario that you have to try to play the mind games of the Protect coming out from the Fluttermane, but no, it's going to be a retreat.
Yeah, it's going to switch out, not want to even contend with that Sucker Punch here, as it will allow the Incineroar to maybe deal with the Chien-Pao. And the Sucker Punch coming out and failing. Great switch here from Nils as the knockoff comes out onto the Goldengo, and it is going to remove the leftovers item, take away that line of recovery, but it does allow the Goldengo to get that nasty plot set up once again.
And that's sort of what Oliver has to try to lean into in order to be able to dispatch of these Pokemon that tend to actually resist the Make It Rain signature move of itself. So it's going to force a scenario where Oliver may have to try to depend on boosted Shadow Balls to be able to at least dispatch of this Urshifu.
Yeah, and it's really difficult in this scenario where the Chien-Pao is in that position now where it can only target one thing. You're not going to be able to pick up the Urshifu with one attack. Do you go after the Incineroar? But we are seeing a terrestrialization finally from Nils' side of the field, going for that Water Terra type to boost the power of those Water type attacks from the Urshifu.
Oh, and it is, of course, going to be moving first thanks to that Choice Scarf targeting down the Chien-Pao. Yeah, it most definitely will be able to pick up a KO there. No Sucker Punch coming out as well. There could have been a scenario, maybe if you're trying to lean into Sucker Punch crits here, but this Golden Go is going to be left on its lonesome self in a 3 versus 1 affair at the current moment. I I don't think he'll be able to have enough in the tank to be able to push this through. Knocked off doing very minimal damage, but the Shadow Ball does target down the Urshifu. It does pick up the KO, but once again, you cannot outspeed this Flutter Mane that can threaten the Moonblast KO.
Yeah, and that's the problem. I think now as well, the Goldingo has taken a lot more damage than that initial turn where it was full health. So you've got to say the Moonblast is going to be enough. Nils doing everything right in this situation, this tough situation after that critical hit as well, to preserve that Flutter Mane, knowing that it's the answer that he needs to be able to distinguish this Goldingo at the end of the game.
Yeah, and it's going to be coming out right now. The Moonblast does seal up this game 1 in favor of Nils in what was a very, very close affair of a board state interactions between both of these trainers.
Yeah, really, really good interactions throughout that game. And Nils coming out on top there, really impressive to see the way that he was able to manage the Flutter Mane under really, really pressure situations. Bringing in the Urshifu as well at the right time, catching that Sucker Punch, it failing from the Chen Pao, and then in the position to take full advantage of that Choice Scarf item, getting rid of it, eliminating it, and then the 1 versus the Goldingo is just easy when you've got the Flutter Mane, especially with the Dragon Terror typing that came back to kind of bite Oliver a little bit in the end there.
Yeah, it really did, and there were some really nice high-level plays between both of these trainers. I think the reliance over going for the terrestrialization from the Goldingo sort of acted as a bait slot for Oliver to be able to say, okay, Flutter Mane, you really need to be able to focus on this slot, especially when I've got multiple nasty plot boosts going. So it allows more room for the partner Pokemon on Oliver's side to be able to sort of support it necessarily. But I'm not sure if it ended up being to his detriment. He wasn't able to be flexible at some point with it, and unfortunately, he didn't have the speed advantage required to be able to dispatch of Nils' very fast and heavy-hitting Pokemon.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that you could really look at in that last match in particular was the fact that Oliver utilized the Amoonguss with that Rage Powder at the cost of setting up those 2 nasty plots, right? And then Nils playing so well, he pinned that Goldingo into a position where it was forced to switch out. So essentially you're wasting 2 turns that Oliver took to set those nasty plots up, as well as wasting the utility of the Amoonguss there. Kind of essentially was rendered useless because those nasty plots that it was taken down for didn't really come into effect at all. So Nils really playing super well to pin Oliver into that position. And I think if you are Oliver, you really need to go into this next match and get a lot more value out of that Amoonguss, because if you are going to let it go down at the sacrifice of getting nasty plots up, you have to make sure that you've got the right Pokemon in the right place to allow that Goldingo the ability to utilize those attack boosts, not like what happened in that last match. A lot easier said than done, of course, but I think it just goes to show how well Nils managed that game in general, just based off that one kind of situation.
Yeah, I think that's well summarized, and we did have Oliver in a bit of a contentious situation. Having to potentially even consider the Tornadus is tough in order to have that speed control advantage, because you're going up against a semi-room sort of thing. You've got the Trick Room option with that Porygon too. So Nils may feel that Oliver has to bring the Tornadus and immediately switch up his mode as well. So it's sort of a 50-50. We could see a completely, entirely different staff being brought from both of these trainers, actors in this affair, but I think what you mentioned, at least Oliver's approach, seems to be trying to anticipate both the Trick Room and cover that, but also cover the main threats, hence why the reliance on the Amoonguss could be quite key.
Yeah, and I think you need to have a way to better deal with the Flutter Mane, really, and be able to put a lot more pressure on that without having to put the Goldingo at risk. But we are getting straight into game 2, and we have some change-ups.
Change-ups indeed from both of these trainers. It seems like we've got an adaptation to an adaptation. Oliver rocking the Tornadus Incarnate and the Landorus Therian versus Nils' Porygon 2, which did get the download special attack boost, as well as that Incineroar. So Fake Out, Trick Room setup seems to be very nice here.
Yeah, you do. If you go for that, you have got the Intimidate onto the Landorus. You do have to contend with some damage here. It's pretty easy for the Landorus just go for an Earthquake, but may not see that because that Tornadus not wanting to contend with the situation right in the field, bringing that Amoonguss in light of potentially a Trick Room being set up.
As we have actually a double switch here, so Oliver just going full frontal, expecting the Trick Room to be easily set up here and wanting to start going ahead and capitalizing off of this sort of passive setup experience, as we do that Fake Out and Ice Beam targeting the Goldingo, showing a bit more.
Oh, huge
my
freeze!
lord, that's such such a huge freeze that really may slow everything down in terms of momentum for Oliver's side. I was just about to say, we've got a scenario where Nils did really want to get rid of that Landres. You know, you felt that he wanted to in order to open up the Ursaluna in the back to not be susceptible to intimidates, but that is really very potential, huge impact onto his strategy.
It's a massive turn here, really unfortunate for Oliver, but you go for those ice beams, you are eventually going to get the look with that. And happening here for Nils, not wanting to commit to the Trick Room, knowing that the Amoonguss could likely switch in, calling that correctly, going for the ice beam, the safe play. Whatever comes in there is going to take a bit of damage, really capitalizing in this position. The Amoonguss now in a really tricky spot. Two Pokemon that it doesn't like facing down with super effective attacks against it, has to be very careful in this scenario.
And you do have Flare Blitz that you need to, if you're Nils, you might not want to try to focus down on in order to thaw out the Golden Ghost, so you may have to try to knock off target that slot too.
Yeah, I mean, the knockoff into that slot's fine. I think we are seeing the Rage Powder come out from this Amoonguss in the hope that the Goldengo does thaw out this turn. Incineroar not going for the attacks, going for that parting shot, weakening that side of the field. Special attack down one stage, and it opens the door for this Porygon 2 to get a big Terra Blast off here into the Amoonguss, which has not terrestrialized, going to be weak to that. It has got the special attack boost as well, probably going to be enough to get rid of that Amoonguss.
Oh, but the Golden Girl remains frozen, unable to break through its shackles of ice-type situations. Terra Blast focus into the Amoonguss. It is not enough to pick up the KO. It survives on 2 HP somehow, some way with the +1 special attack. This is absolute insanity, as I did really like that semi-turn interaction. Being able to see the Rage Powder come out first allows Nils to know he can safely bring in that Ursaluna, and there's no Spore targeting that slot.
Yeah, it's a really nice play here, taking full advantage of that frozen Goldengo here. The Rage Powder did look like it was there to kind of protect the Goldengo, but in its essence, really you would have been going for the Spore into that Porygon 2 in this situation. Of course, hindsight's a beautiful thing. We are going to see the terrestrialization from Oliver's side of the field now, trying to claw this match back slightly with the Dragon terrestrialization on the Goldengo, praying that it does thaw out this turn. Got to worry about a big Earthquake coming out from this Ursaluna, though, and what this Porygon 2 is about to do.
As Amoonguss goes for the Protect, it does not want to mess around with anything here. Unfortunately, the Goldengo is frozen yet again. Oliver not being able to capitalize off of that and go and play to his outs even if he tries. Earthquake will be affecting this Goldengo. This is Flame Orb, Guts boosted. It's not enough to beat up the KO, but it does guarantee the 2-shot as well as the Trick Room now being set up in Amoonguss. Doesn't have as much wiggle room as it would have liked.
No, not at all. It does not really have the attacks either to really damage the Ursaluna. We don't see a grass-type attack on there. We don't see poison-type that might have been good in different Terra situations. It's got that Pollen Puff, which is not really going to be doing the damage to the Ursaluna that you need to. You have got the option now where you could go for the Spore into the Porygon 2, slow that down, try and waste some of the Trick Room turns. But even doing that, you've really got to contend with this Ursaluna that's going to be easily able to throw out Earthquake after Earthquake and some of those other type attacks that it's got access to.
Yeah, and Landorus is a nice little offset to be able to reduce the damage output of this Ursaluna, but it's the fact that this Goldengo has been frozen and sort of has locked in that slot for Oliver, because you're scared of bringing in a new Pokemon as well until this point, as we actually have a switch up and we've got both Amoonguss coming in naturally from Nils' side as well.
Yeah, then the Amoonguss coming in from Nils' side, a really good call, because if the Spore comes out into that slot, gonna have the immunity, and then Nils has access to an Amoonguss under a Trick Room as well, and that's exactly what we see. We're going to see another Earthquake come in. It is going to damage the Amoonguss on Nils' side of the field, but fine, because you are able to take down the biggest threat to your Trick Room operations in the Amoonguss on Oliver's side.
It's such a nice play, because at least you know you got the Regenerator to be able to bank on for a switch out afterwards and get another EQ off as well. But most importantly, right now, the Ursaluna is at -1 of its attack. However, we know Facade, Guts boosted, still hits hard with this same type attack bonus. So it's going to be threatening every single Pokemon on Oliver's side, and he's really pushed back against the wall at the moment.
Yeah, and one of the issues you've got as well for Oliver is in normal situations, the Goldingo, one of those Pokemon that can avoid the facade, but we are seeing the forfeit locked in. Nils taking a huge lead in that one, and the winner of this round 12.
Wow, what a roller coaster of a match between these two trainers. Extremely unfortunate with the Goldingo being frozen for, what was it, Lee? Like 3 or 4 turns, if I'm not mistaken.
3 turns.
And you already know that with such offensive matchups going into this, every single turn matters. And the fact that we had one slot locked in for 3 turns was just too much of an aggregate for Oliver to be able to reposition around this mode.
Yeah, and you know, it just gave Nils an easy ride to be able to effectively deal with that Amoonguss, not really have to worry about the Pokemon on the other slot, and the threat of the Trick Room there the whole time. You couldn't really freely take the Goldingo out there, committing to the Terastallization to maybe take the Earthquake a little bit better, in hope that you did get the Thaw and be able to have some functionality there. The Amoonguss survival was huge, but just didn't go for the Spore there. The Rage Powder was the right thing to do in that situation, to give yourself a little bit of a buffer with the freeze to thaw out, but just really not paying off at the detriment of Oliver, unfortunately.
Yeah, and can we really talk about that survival of the Amoonguss? That must be extremely bulky in its special defensive prowess, allowing it to at least survive on 2 hit points, which is something unprecedented versus a download boosted Flying Terror. But yeah, that Porygon 2, just the perfect adaptation to this Tailwind setup as well, and quite crucially, picking up the Ice Beam Freeze.
Yeah, and we'll not mention as well, I'd forget to mention, the switch from the Porygon 2 into the Amoonguss as well from Nils to really alleviate the issue that was created by Oliver's Amoonguss surviving on that 2 HP, soaking up the Spore there, freeing up the Ursaluna, and like we saw at that stage, Oliver was just resigned to the fact that really couldn't come back after his own Amoonguss had went down.
Yeah, and I think I completely understand Oliver feeling forced to have to bring Tailwind, especially after that game 1, but that's sort of the point that we're talking about earlier, the adaptation to the adaptation.
Yeah.
When do you make that decision? And that's something that we see a key skill in highly veteran trainers such as Nils, as well as Oliver, but he was able to get that call, and he made it, and he's like, okay, Thorn with Tailwind makes a lot of sense. Porygon 2 is just going to be a Thorn completely in your side and just switch things up. And he had the advantage. He didn't feel as pressured as Oliver did.
Yeah, exactly right. And we have Nils ready on stage with Charlie so we can get an overview of his thoughts after that incredible round 12.
Well, in the face of that Goldingo, Nils was still able to cash in, trainers. Nils, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. I mean, of course, I got the freeze, but if I'm honest, I didn't go for it. It's just the game wanted me to have a much more easier match. Me and Oliver had been like team building a bit together, so I had some intricacies of like how, for example, his Amoonguss was under my Ursaluna. So I planned to sort of like do a delayed Trick Room, and of course, freeze helped, but I felt like I had a gist of how I could beat him.
Okay, fair enough. It didn't all come down to that freeze then. So, game 1, you were able to preserve your Flutter Mane until later on in the game. Tell us a little bit about that.
I just saw that his Amoonguss had no Sludge Bomb, and I didn't really feel like he could handle my Flutter Mane since I had sub. So I tried to sort of play the game of like containing my sub and just being annoying, because I know that his game plan against me was a lot of like based on Goldingo, and I didn't want to go out swinging all going for the kill on Goldingo because he's going to protect it heavily. So I tried to like delete pieces that later on I could handle Goldingo.
Yeah, and that Goldingo in the end game really needed to take out alone there, being left on the field. Then heading into game 2, of course, those assets were frozen, cold cash coming out,
Indeed.
and as you said, it really helped you out, but it wasn't entirely necessary for your game plan. So talk to us about what you would have done had the freeze not happened.
If I remember the situation, I think it's basically that I would try to pivot in my Ursaluna, and I know that he can take a +2 make it rain, so I felt that it would be fine, even if he was going to start attacking, and that way I could start punishing at least TR, because I knew that his Amoonguss couldn't contain my Ursaluna if I ever got in on a free switch-in, not where he tried to Spores it. So my idea was mainly just to like force in our saloon and then go from there.
Sure, and that is what was able to happen in the end, reversing that cash flow so that the speed order was the other way around. And then financial crash, that golden goat went entirely down. So that was a fairly clean game for you, Nils. How are you feeling heading into the rest of the day?
I think I'm just going to focus on playing my game. I like my headspace, and I think I'm just going to believe in my play and continue just grinding out the games, because with a format of instant drill everywhere, you sort of need to do that like slow, grindy game and get one piece and then win from there, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the headspace is so important that you call out there, Nils. It's more of a mental game than it might first seem, Pokemon. Able to stay calm and collected is absolutely crucial. So, Nils, now I want to ask you.
Okay.
Bulbasaur, Charmander, or Squirtle?
I would say Mudkip, but if you had to choose, I would say Charmander.
Oh my goodness, no!
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say Squirtle.
No,
so
I've
the
never
reason
been a
I
Squirtle
react
fan.
like that is because we've had, I believe now, 6 votes for Bulbasaur, 6 for Charmander, and 1 for Squirtle.
Yeah, no, it's Charmander.
Oh my
That's
goodness.
what I started with.
So that's 7 for Charmander. Mudkip as well. I know that Lee at the casting desk wanted me to substitute in Totodile for Squirtle. So Lee, if you're watching, that one's for you. Totodile, also a cool Pokemon, but not one of those Kanto starters. Okay, well, that's another one for Charmander then.
Yeah.
Finally, Nils, any shout-outs you want to give?
Thank you to my mom, my brother, and as well, just everybody that supported me throughout this tournament, and I appreciate it a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those touching words there, Nils. Well, we've just had Swiss round 12, but there's so much more of the tournament into which to delve.